Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how I created this crystal lamp. I've upcycled a Kmart lamp and I want to show you how I created it. Now these lamps sell really well at on my market stall at the weekend, and I wanted to share with you a little project that maybe you could do that you could sell at markets and things as well. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So for this project, I'm actually going to use some lamps that I bought from Kmart. They cost $27 for two lamps. I've put together two pool noodles, well, a pool noodle which I cut down and made a little stand to stand the lamps on. And then I bought these crystals from Temu, which is fluorite crystals, and what I've done is they were actually quite large, so I've actually used a small hammer to break them down into smaller chunks, and what happened was they split where there was natural cracks, so that gave me some smaller pieces. So I'm actually going to be using some of the smaller shards as well. And I bought these ones from Kmart, oh god, a few years back now, when I last did some lamps, probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and I've got some of these left over, so they'll work well to add as fillers. So let's get into it. Oh, and I forgot to mention that we're going to be using some chroma acryl impasto gel medium, which dries clear, to glue these on. Now I've used this stuff for many projects and glued all sorts of things to glass, and they're still holding up 2 or 3 years on. So I really like this stuff for gluing stones and things to glass, and what I'm going to apply it with is just a straightforward stick. So the first thing I want to do is actually want to divide these stones into two piles. Because I've got two lamps, I want to try and share the stones between the two lamps, so we've got a similar looking lamp so that it looks like a pair. So I don't mind if the colours are not quite the same, but I just want to try and get equal sizes of stones from one lamp to another. And the shards I'm not too worried about because I'll just add them as I go along. So I've got those for the second lamp, and this is for the first lamp. So the first thing I want to do is to apply some gel medium to the lamp. So I'm just going to just go one stone at a time, but as well as applying to the lamp, I'm also going to apply some to the stone, just so that we fit in amongst the nooks and crannies. And like I say, this is going to dry clear, so you're not going to really see too much. And I'm just going to slowly work my way around this and add some extra stones. Now I'm going to leave this sticker on because anyone that purchases it, they know what size bulb they can put in there, but then obviously they can remove it once it's purchased, so I will leave that on there. And I'm not going to do the whole lamp with the stones, because I want to have some areas where I may well paint a little bit of alcohol ink. I'm not sure yet, so we'll wait and see what happens with that. So I'm starting off with the larger chunks at the bottom, and as I move out, I'll go with smaller ones. So I'll just rotate that just slightly. Now I've got this hanging off the end because that's where the cord is, so it means it still lies flat. So just seeing how I'm going to position these. I may not use those other larger pieces. I might just have the 4 and then smaller ones moving out. And don't worry too much about the excess here, because we can sort that once we've applied the stones. At the moment, we just need to make sure there's plenty of medium on there, just to make sure these stick well. And if you want to be a little bit more accurate with how much gel medium you're putting on there, then I would recommend using a palette knife, which is maybe a little bit more shaped. But for me, I'm not too concerned about it. Like I say, because it dries clear and I'm quite happy with that finished look. So now I'm just going to take some smaller pieces and start adding those. Now I've found anything that I do with crystals sells well. Whenever I create anything with crystals, they sell quite quickly. So this is why I'm adding these to the lamps. It's just giving them a new look, something different that you just can't buy in the shops. And if you were to find something in the shops, they'd be really expensive. So making your own is obviously always going to be favourable. I will sell this though. So because it's a unique, one-of-a-kind piece, it won't be really cheap, but knowing that a lot of love and attention's gone into creating them. And while the gel medium's still wet, you can obviously reposition and get the look that you're after. Now I should have stuck a bulb in there actually so I could test it out, but I'll do that later. So now I'm just going to take some of the smaller shards and add those. I might not end up using any of these, to be honest with you, because I'm quite liking this shape at the front, because this is obviously the front of the lamp. So now I'm just going to start sticking some of the smaller pieces. Now, sorry if I'm muttering and things. I tend to do that when I'm creating, and I tend to mutter to myself, so I do apologise in advance for that. And by using a stick and a palette knife, I actually like that you don't get uniform patterns and shapes, so you can actually make a nice texture on the surface. So I may well do that. I may well go around and add texture and pattern to the surface just for so that it's just something a little bit different. And that even though this is frosty, this will give a nice glossy finish on the surface. And the good thing with stones, even though I've smashed these with a hammer, they're not sharp, so you're not going to cut yourself like you would glass, but they give a nice feeling of glass, which is quite nice. Okay, I'm quite liking that, so I think it needs some more stones around the bottom and maybe opening up a little bit. So I think I shall get a smaller spatula for there, just so that I'm not getting any glue on here, which will wipe off, but just to be on the safe side. So I'll use, have a rubber, well, silicone paintbrush, which I'm just going to flatten some of this out just so it's not so chunky, and then I'll add some more stones in there, some small pieces. And all I'm doing now is I'm just reducing the bulk of the texture away from the edge so that we've got a nice transition from the gel medium onto the glass. So I'm going to turn this around just so I can get to the other side. Okay, so there's quite a lot of medium in there, so I can get some stones in there. And all I'm doing is I'm just taking some of the really tiny pieces and I'm just filling some gaps. Now I want to, there's just a little bit untidy there, so I'm just going to tidy that up a little bit with a paintbrush. So I'm just going to smooth some of this out with a paintbrush just so it's not so untidy. And quite a lot there, so I'm actually going to take some of that off, a bit too much. And then just smooth it out a little bit. I think it might need a little bit more just around the edges here. So I'm just looking for small pieces. I don't want large pieces around the edge. And what I'm looking for is I'm actually looking for thinner pieces for up the top. Not sure. I might have to take these ones off and put them back on around the edges. There's always a way, you know, when you're doing these things, you don't always have a firm plan. We have an idea on what you're going to do, but as you're working on it, the ideas develop more, and then you get more of a sense on how it's going to look. So what I want to do is go from the chunky down to thinner, and it was a bit too thin in that area there, so that's why I took those off just so that I can add some chunkier pieces, and we can make it a bit thinner as we move out. So let me see what we have. That piece will fit in there quite nicely. And it's a little bit like doing a mosaic, you know, you're trying to fit pieces into small gaps and make them work. And no two will ever be the same for that reason, because obviously the stones are different shapes and have different looks and textures. So I think now I can start going back and putting some of these smaller pieces back in now. Yeah, that's looking better. And some of the darker ones, just so we could add a little bit of contrast up the top. Needs a bit more material on there. Okay, so it probably needs just a little bit around there. I might need some more. Oh, they slipped. And that's why we've got the pool noodle here, is to keep this balance so that they get a chance to dry. Okay, so I'm going to put some little stones over here. So all I'm doing now is I'm just adding some texture to the outside edges, because what I want to do is I'll add some colour to the outside when this is dried, but I'll let this. So I just want to see what this is looking like. Sorry, you can't see this too well. I'm just adding some additional texture to the outside edges, so I'll see if I can show you what I'm doing. So all I'm doing is I'm just going to add some texture to the outside and just pull it down and smooth it out a touch. Okay, so I'm going to leave this to cure, and then I'll come back and add the colour. So I'm going to go and do the same thing with the other one. Well, welcome back. So it's now the next day. The stones are pretty stuck on now, although we need to leave it a few more days to make sure it's fully stuck, but I can work on this now. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to colour the outside and in between the stones. So in order to do that, I'm going to use some isopropyl alcohol along with some alcohol inks. So I've got blue violet and rainforest green. So the first thing I want to do, so I want the center to be quite dark But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spray some of the isopropyl alcohol in the center, just so that when I drop the ink in, it spreads a little bit. So I'm going to start with the rainforest green, and I'm just going to drop that in, and then just using a brush, I'm just going to just push it about a little bit just to spread that around. Now I'm not worrying whether I get any of the ink on the stones or anything, because I think that adds to the look of the piece. So I'm just going to go around, and I'm allowing the brush to actually touch the sides of the stones, and so that the ink looks like it's spreading up the stones, and that's where the alcohol actually helps with the movement of the ink. And it will run around the edge and start moving out to the edge. That's fine. I'm going to have the green on this side and then the blue violet running down the other side. I have to touch my alcohol. Now I'm being mindful to try and have the top part level, just so that when I spread the ink around it, it doesn't run too quickly down the sides. Now anywhere where we do have any runoff, if you want to fix that, just use some isopropyl and just blend that in. Now it is going to go from dark to light, so that's not too much of an issue, but if you want to just keep an eye on that. Now don't worry if you get any ink on the outside of the metal bit, because we're going to wipe that off with some alcohol later when this is all dried. Now it looks a little bit messy at the moment, but it will look better once it's finished. Now I'm using the brush to get underneath the stones as well, to make sure that it goes into all of the nooks and crannies. Now if you don't like the stones having some of the alcohol, and you can actually come back later and wipe that off. Okay, so now I just want to just add a little bit of, just check the colours. So I just want to add a little bit of the isopropyl down the side here. That's the wrong colour, done well there. Not to worry, I'll cover that up later. So I'm just going to allow this to run down the sides, and then just add more of the isopropyl just to blend that out a bit. Now we're going to build up on the colours, so the depth of it. So we're just going to blend this out, and then we will add more as we go along. Now what I've found is where I've put the texture, that actually retains the colour. It doesn't spread so much as it does on the glass. So it might be, if you want to have it spreading out a little bit more, that you don't go with the texture all the way across the glass. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this to just round to the back, because of when I do the other side with the blue violet, I want it to meet this colour, and then we'll do some blending at the back. Now the good thing with alcohol inks, that they dry fairly quickly, so it means that you can work on other areas without having to wait for it to dry too quickly. So now I'm just going to turn this around the other way, so I'm going to do the same this way, but this time with the blue violet. So move that brush out the way. Okay, so pop the lid on there, move that out of the way so I don't get mixed up, and then I'm just going to add some more isopropyl alcohol, and then this time I'm going to add the blue violet in between these areas, and then use my brush to spread this around and get into all those nooks and crannies. And again, we're just going to water it down a little bit with or thin it down a little bit with the alcohol, just so that we can blend that out. Now, as the alcohol dries fairly quickly, you do have to work quickly, otherwise you can end up with unwanted lines. And that's why I'm working in a circular motion, just so that I don't have any hard lines. So now I'm just going to work it out. I've gone a little bit too heavy-handed with the alcohol there, so I'm just going to blend that out a little bit. Now the back, I'm not worrying too much about the back because you don't really see the back much, but when the light's on, you will get the colour continuing round. Okay, so I need to add a touch more purple around here. And again, don't worry about getting any of the ink onto the outside rim, because we can clean that up later. Now what I do want is I want to have some of the ink creeping up the sides of the stones because I want that painterly effect. You might look at this and go, what the hell is she doing? There is a method in my madness sometimes. And I'm not adding any more ink to the brush. I'm just using what's already on the brush to brush up the sides of the stones, just to help it blend a little bit so it doesn't look like a hard edge. So I might just spray it onto the brush. There we go. Perhaps needs a bit of colour in this area. And I'm only doing one drop at a time and allowing it to spread. Okay, so we're getting there. So as you can see, we've got colour creeping up the sides of the stones. I'm just going to do a bit more with the green side and then add a little bit more purple up blue violet around there. So I'm going to do the same. That's my blue one. So I'm just going to do the same with this, just add a little bit of isopropyl alcohol to the brush, and then just literally just brush it up the sides so that I get a little bit of the colour creeping up the sides onto the stones. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more green round the side here and make it a little bit darker. So, and this is the reason why I'm making it a bit darker, that when we come to put the lamp on, you'll still see some of that colour. Although it will be faded quite a bit because obviously the light passing through, but this just adds a little bit of something extra to it. So that what we want is we want it to look nice when the lamp is off as well as when it's on. Now I've done a few of these lamps in the past and they usually sell quite quickly. So people really like the fact that they're unique and they are different. Now what I also want to do is I want to add a little bit of darkness around the edge of here also, just so that it looks, I don't know, just I quite like that. It just adds a touch more shadow to that area, and then we're just going to go lighter as we move out. And I'm just using a mixture of the colour straight and then just add in some alcohol to blend that out. So I'm just going to just blend this out. Now you don't need a lot of alcohol to do this. We just want to ease it out. And I don't mind seeing little blooms and things as well, because this adds to it. Now where we've added the texture, it doesn't tend to bloom as much. I might actually sort that out a little bit. So I'm just going to keep going until I like it. So okay, so it's getting there. So I just want to do a bit more blending on this side. So I'm just going to add more of the darker colour along the edges like before. Now I'm thinking I'm going to seal this with some more of the gel medium just to add some more texture, because I quite like the texture and the glossy finish it gives to it. So I think I'm going to do that as well. Right, okay, I'm going to clean up the sides and then I'll come back and add more texture to the sides. So I don't know what you think of that. So just using a baby wipe with some of the alcohol, I'm just going to clean off the excess, and it comes off fairly easily. And there we have it. Okay, so let me plug it in and then we'll turn it on. Just something a bit different. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some additional texture over the top, and this is going to not only add the texture but seal it as well. So I put some of the gel medium in it, saved over from yesterday, in a jar. So I'm just going to start applying this just like so. Now it'll dry clear, so I'm not too worried about the colour or anything, but what I want to do is I want to just make sure that we've got texture all the way around the lamp. Now I should have done this yesterday, but you live and learn, so I think it would have worked better if I'd textured this off the bat. So I'm just going to go around and do that, and this will then be ready tomorrow. Okay, so I've come back today and I've decided that the colours are a little bit too bright. So what I want to do is I want to knock them back. So what I'm using is some Pinata Rich Gold, and I'm just going to use a brush to go in between and tone back the green and the purple. But I'm also going to go over the stones and just gently just add some highlights, so a little bit of colour to the stones, just to help bring out the shine. So when the light hits it from different angles, you'll start seeing a little bit of the gold. And I'm also going to go around the edges. So I'm going to take the gold around the edges and then just dry brush it out to then pick out some of that texture. So I'm just going to go around and do that all the way around the edges. Now I still want there to be some green and gold shining through, sorry, green and purple shining through. So I'm just going to start with the heavier gold closer to the stones. As my brush starts to dry out, I'm just then going to pull it out to pick out, see how it's picking out some of that texture. Now, just by adding a small amount at a time, I can then build up the gold. So if I want the gold to move further around, I can add it as I go on. And as you can see, it just tones back and mutes the green a little bit because it was just a bit too much, I thought. And then obviously, because I'm adding gold to the outside, I want to add gold to the in-between areas as well. So I'm just going to add the gold in between and then just brush it up the sides of the stones just to get a little bit of extra texture on the stones, but also to help elevate them a little bit. Now, I often find after I've worked on a project, I usually come back, I usually leave it a day or two and then come back and see, one, if I like what I've done, or two, if I can see where I can make improvements. Now, obviously, there has to come a time when you say, okay, enough is enough. But sometimes when you do something, you think, you know what, there's something missing, or I'm not really liking what I've created here. So there's an opportunity to rework it and get something that you do like. And if when you leave it, you're still not sure of whether it's looking quite right, then put it away for a while and then come back and have a look at a later date, because you might just then get inspiration of improvements you need to make, or you might find that you actually like what you created in the first place. I've done that before where I've done something and then come back later and realize that it didn't need anything extra. After all, I just needed to sit with it and ponder with it for a while. But other times, like today, where I've just straight away I've come in and said, it's too much, the colour's too much. I want it to be a little bit more subtle. So the gold is helping me do that without having to disregard the whole thing. I've done that before as well. I had some other lamps that I painted and I really didn't like them. And I was not sure what I was going to do with them. And when I went back to the market stall, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take them with me. I'll just mark them down a little bit and see what happens. Well, the first day I was back at the market stall, they were the first things to sell. So you just can't tell. So, you know, you might not like it yourself, but then other people could just fall in love with something. And more often than not, I find it's the ones that you don't like yourself is the things that people love. And then the ones that you do like, you sit on them for ages before anybody comes to buy it. So it's not up to you to decide which is the best ones, because your customers are going to do that. Because not everything you make is going to be for everybody. And that's fine. And that's the beauty of art, is it's very subjective. And some people will love what you do, other people won't, but that's fine, because you just need to find your tribe who actually enjoys what you create. Right, I need to go and get some more of this gold because I've run out, I think. Just let me give it a shake just in case. Oh no, there's still a bit in there. It was just a bit blocked. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to add some of the gold around the bottom here, just so that it blends in a little bit, because like I say, it's just a little bit too much of the green and the purple. So I'm just going to take this down and blend it a bit more. And again, if you get any alcohol ink on the metal, it's easy to wipe off with some more alcohol. It just wipes off quite nicely. So I just use a baby wipe coated with some alcohol, and that takes it off really easily. So again, just add a little bit of highlights here and there to the stones, and it just gives it a little bit of an extra sheen. Okay, so I'll turn this around so I can get to it a little bit easier. And you can see how this is now looking a little bit more muted. It doesn't look as stark. So look how stark this looks compared to this side. So now I'm going to work on this side. I'll just make sure you're in frame. I'll just move you over a little bit. There we go. So I'm just going to go in between the stones and then just add a little bit of the gold. And I quite like that the other colour, the green and the purple, is shining through, that it's not just gold, so it just adds a little bit more depth to it. The one thing about art, there's no right and wrong way to do things. You know, I'm hoping that by me doing this is giving you some inspiration for your own pieces, and that you find ideas to create something similar or even better, which no doubt you will do. So again, I'm just starting with the colour a bit heavier next to the stones, and then just using the brush. I'm just going to dry brush that onto the texture just to pick that texture out and see how it's lifting it. And we've got some of the purple still showing through. So when the brush starts drying out, then you can start pulling it down a little bit, because you don't want it to too much gold coming down. So we're just doing some gentle highlights. Now once I've done these will be making their way to my market stall tomorrow, and I'll let you know if they sell. Now I find that upcycling things like lamps and vases and other functional items actually sells really well in my stall. I find that basic art, like wall art, doesn't sell so well. It does sell, but it takes a lot longer, because there's a lot of times where people just don't have the wall space, or they might like a piece, but it's not quite the right color for their area. But I find that if it's a lamp or a vase, they're a little bit more open to parting with some money and then getting it, because they don't see it as being such a major purchase. Well, that's what I'm finding anyway, because it's more of a seasonal thing. So they might buy it because they love it and say, oh yeah, you know what, I'm going to get that. It doesn't really go with anything in my room, but I just like it anyway, so I'm going to buy it. So I found that with lamps and with vases. So I'm doing more of those, and so I'm hoping to bring you some more upcycled ideas for lamps and vases. And please leave a comment about your thoughts on whether you would like to see that kind of content from me. Now I find doing this type of thing so therapeutic. I just find it so relaxing to just get stuck in with stuff like this. And the thing with stuff like this, I think because it's just a lamp, that nothing needs to be perfect. You're not trying to create any kind of masterpiece. And so I think you can be a little bit freer and go with the flow. Whereas I speak to a lot of people who feel intimidated by, say, let's doing a resin piece, or they want to create a painting of some description, but they sit with a blank canvas and they don't know where to start. So I think working on some functional way, then I think that takes the pressure off a little bit. Okay, we're getting there. So I'm just gonna still go in between some of these areas here to make sure that I've coated it with some of the gold. And because I like this so much, it probably will take a while to sell. Because like I say, the one that I wasn't keen on, that sold. So you just don't know. Now I'll be adding this to my website as well. So if you want to go and have a look at the photos and things of the of this on my website, I shall leave some links in the description. And also you can go onto my website, and in the sold area, you can see some of the previous pieces that I've worked on. You'll probably recognize some of them from videos that I've created in the past, because I've been doing these videos now probably for about 6 or 7 years. And I think I did my very first video 9 years ago, and it was I was upcycling vases then, so that's funny that I was doing that then. But with that one, I was upcycling it with some polymer clay, and my first videos are not very good. Not that my latest ones are that great either, but my first ones were, I was too scared to speak on camera, so I just had music, and the music I picked was horrendous. And I've had a few people comment and saying, "Oh, the music's too much." So nowadays, I don't tend to bother with music in the background. One, because I really can't be bothered going to find royalty-free music. But also, I just think, I'm not a big fan of listening to music myself when I'm watching videos. So that's another reason why I don't really add music. I have tried on a few previous videos, but my latest ones, I'm just like, no, you can always listen to music in the background if you want. So I'm really liking how this is looking. See how it's more muted and it's a lot more toned back. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start working on bringing out some of this, the highlights on this texture as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start over here just to dry the brush out a little bit, and then I'll come back and then just go over the surface. I don't want the paintbrush to be too wet. So again, just going over here, just getting the excess off, and then I'm just going to go over the top and just bring out some of that texture. Now I don't mind a little bit of gold down near the bottom here next to the metal piece, but what I want to do is I just want to make sure that I'm mainly picking out the texture of the raised bits. So that's why I'm lying the brush flat against it and just going in a swirling motion. I'm not too worried if I do get a little bit of gold in between, because it just adds a little bit of extra interest. But we're not completely disguising the colour underneath. Because then if I did that, if I went over it with all the gold, you wouldn't actually see the lamp shining through other than on the stones. And that could be something that you'd be interested in doing. But for me, I wanted to be able to see the colour shining through. Okay, so I'm going to continue around doing this, and then I'll be back to show you the finished piece. Okay, so I'm quite happy with this now. And so I'm going to call this a day. That's what it looks like on. So as you can see, you can still see some of the colour coming through. But you can see the stones. But I actually prefer it off, if I'm honest. But someone will like it. Okay, so here's the finished piece. As you can see, it's turned out it's quite effective. And I'm going to leave these stickers on the bottom just for any customers, so that they know what size bulb and things they can use in there. But I do provide it with a bulb, so it gives them somewhere to start. But as you can see, I think it's actually turned out quite well. So now here it is all lit up. Now I don't think it looks quite as effective as it does when it's off, but I think it still is a unique piece that hopefully any customers will really enjoy. So here's the other one I worked on as well. So I did actually work on two at the same time. So they do make a really nice pair together. So as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up, or better still, subscribe to my channel. I'll be bringing you some new ideas very soon. So until then, bye for now.